All right, everybody, welcome here to Sports Talk for You. My name is Aaron Bell, and again, I got my co-host Adam Parker and Armand Ely with
Hello.
us. We have a very special guest today. He is a well-known college basketball analyst. He is well-known in the AAC and here around the Wichita area because he commentates a lot of Wichita State basketball games. I want to welcome in Mark Adams.
Hello, thanks, Mark. Guys. Great to be with you.
Great to have you on the show today.
You bet. This will be fun, man. I get to talk to some Shockers and talk some American. It's all good.
All right. Let's get it going.
And I know you were wanting to talk about your past season here in the AAC, and I know you commentated a lot of games. I think you did a couple Wichita State games out here at Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
And I just want to let you get into what you feel was your greatest memories from this past season, the AAC, and maybe was the conference down a little bit, or was it just a mediocre conference in your opinion?
No, I think it was a good conference. I mean, I think this league was going to be probably a 3-bid league, and I think that, you know, as you look back on the season, obviously Wichita State got off to a fast start, ranked number 16 in the country, and really had it going. You got Cincinnati, who started off slow, and then all of a sudden picked it up. And one of my favorite memories was actually two of my favorite memories were at UCF. And the reason for that is Cincinnati at UCF. Cincinnati was struggling at the time. And Jaron Cumberland hadn't quite found his land legs yet. You know, he had some injuries earlier in the preseason and was kind of plodding through it, literally plodding through it. In the first half of the UCF game, I'll never forget this. You know, Jaron Cumberland one time, he passes the ball down to Trayvon Scott, and he follows his pass, but literally walks into it. I mean, he's like 30 feet away from the basket. He wads into the shot. They pass it to him. He just shoots it. And I said, he looks like me walking by Basset Hounds, and I'm never shot ready when I'm walking by Basset Hounds. You know, I mean, it was that type of. It almost looked like, you know, he was just kind of like there. Well, at halftime, then John Brannon made the decision. Hey, Jaron, we're giving you the keys to the Jaguar, and go ahead and floor that son of a gun because we're going to ride you all the way to the American #1 seed. In the second half, dude goes crazy. I mean, he played really, really well. And Cincinnati wins on the road. I think it was either a first or second true road win of the season. And then Cincinnati catapults and ends up winning the American. They beat Houston at home. That was during the bite game when DeJon Jarreau, you know, bit Diarra. And next thing you know, you've got Cincinnati being the #1 seed. So those were two kind of strange things and interesting things that happened. And then also at UCF, if you guys remember, and I'm sure you do, Wichita State had gone 0-3 over the last 3 games.
Yeah.
And the sky was falling. I mean, the Doodah Diner was ready to close up, from what I understand. Not really. But I know things weren't good in Wichita at the time. And I talked to Greg Marshall before the game, and, you know, he and I have a long relationship, and I get such great access. I'm grateful for that. And he talked about how that this team just really had not come together. They had not gelled, and they had a come to Jesus meeting. And we're getting ready to go on air. Now, live TV is like doing a podcast, right? There's things that can go wrong. I mean, it's just kind of the way it works sometimes. So we're literally maybe 2 minutes before airtime, and Noah Fernandez is going to be your starting point guard.
Yeah.
Now, so I have game notes. In fact, you know what? I'll bring them out right now. I've got them right. And so I'll bring them out. I don't have Wichita State up front, but these are my game notes. And down here you'll see others. Okay, right there. See that? It says others.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
May not have a great camera on there, but trust me, it says others. So those are the guys like Noah Fernandez. Right? The others, they don't play. Dude was averaging 1 point a game or 1 minute a game, basically.
Yeah.
And so he ends up being inserted in the starting lineup and really played well. And Wichita State wins on the road at UCF. They got mentally healthy again and end up being one of the top 4 seeds in the American. Whereas once upon a time, it looked like they were going to be the #16 team in the country, and then they were just going south. Yeah. You know, so, and I know that there have been challenges after the season. We can talk about that if you want to. But the bottom line is those were two of my favorite memories of coaching really in action with Jaron Cumberland, giving him the keys to the car and saying, floor it, just go do it.
Yeah.
And then Greg Marshall giving the keys to the car to basically an unsung hero, untested freshman, and Noah Fernandez, and it worked out quite well for both programs, really.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to ask you, since we're talking about the past season, for you, was this Memphis team one of the biggest disappointments that you've seen in college basketball this year?
No, and I'll tell you why. So anytime that you've coached and you've got a guy like James Wiseman, who will be the number one pick in the NBA draft, and all of a sudden after 3 games, it probably should have been not at all, by the way.
Yeah.
But after 3 games, he's not playing anymore and then is not going to play for the rest of the year. And then DJ Jeffries, see, nobody talks about DJ. DJ was their second best player. Then he got hurt.
Yeah.
And so now you're playing with all freshmen, all sophomores, all right? And you lead the entire country in defensive field goal percentage. Now think about that. What do coaches always say about freshmen? The best thing about freshmen is they become sophomores. Well, they always say about freshmen, they can't guard anybody. Penny took a bunch of freshmen and sophomores and turned them into arguably, at least by field goal percentage, not even arguably, the best defensive team in the country.
Yeah.
In a conference that hangs their hat on great defenses.
Yeah.
Houston, Wichita State, Cincinnati. You go down the list of the great defensive teams in the league, and Memphis was better defensively than any of them. Think about that.
Yeah.
Now, offensively, they were a train wreck because they turned the ball over a lot. But they had Precious Achiuwa, who was really good. They had young guards who made mistakes. But I thought Penny did a tremendous job coaching. In fact, I think that Penny, in many ways, outkicked his coverage with this team because of what he lost and then how he reconfigured his offense and defense to fit his style of play and his players. And I thought Memphis was actually a pleasant surprise versus a disappointment based on the circumstances that Penny Hardaway and the Tigers faced.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, because that conference was really starting to come together there late in the season, going into the conference tournament, which is depressing that this coronavirus pandemic, we couldn't have any basketball. So let's go ahead and get into – you want to talk about your postseason awards? Did you want to go AAC awards or just your postseason college basketball?
Let's go AAC. I mean, you guys are AAC guys, right? So let's
go
AAC.
Yeah.
Okay. So I would be remiss if I didn't say that my favorite diner in the country, not just in the AAC, is the Doodah Diner, and you all know that.
Yeah.
I mean, and you know why? Well, first of all, I love the food, and I love Tim Marie and Patrick and the whole crew. But the Doodah Diner is the only diner in America that has my picture on the wall.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's one. I mean, I've had a lot of fun with those guys over the years, and of course, the when you talk about greatest arenas in the country, I mean, you guys know that Wichita is a second home for me, and I always love doing a game in the Roundhouse. But let's talk about best pregame ritual. That goes to Danny Hurley of UConn. Why? On game days, he wears superhero T-shirts. The last time I saw him, he had on a He-Man T-shirt. We got a picture taken together. It was very, very cool. Also, UConn has another very unique pregame ritual at home where his wife ends up baking cookies and giving out motivational cards and things to players. It's very, very cool. The best dog in the American Athletic Conference is Sam. Belongs to Joe Dooley of East Carolina. Why? Because Sam can actually open up doors. It's a pretty neat skill, especially if you want to get into a house and steal something. I don't know if Sam does that or not. The best pet, though, the best pet in the American is Kevin. He's a ball python. He belongs to LaQuincy Rideau of South Florida. Now, here's the good news about Kevin. First of all, Kevin's real name is Kevin Durant. Yeah, after that, Kevin Durant. All right. And the reason why this is a special snake is because he doesn't have a girlfriend. Now, why is that special when you're a ball python? Because when ball pythons mate, the females eat the males. So Kevin's still alive, so that's a good thing. The worst pet in the American is David Collins on the same team. Remember David, that backcourt of LaQuincy and David Collins? Guess what his pet is? A freaking chinchilla. Now think about that. A ball python with a chinchilla. Who's going to win that battle? Yeah.
Taking the python.
Yeah, I got money on the ball python for sure. Best cheerleaders, Maisie Jade Sampson, Kelvin Sampson's granddaughter. She's beautiful. Best dressed at 6'7" and over. That's John Brandon and Penny Hardaway. Best dressed at 6 foot and under, more my size, is Brian Gregory. By the way, I could post up Gregory and dunk on him. Best hole-in-one by the worst golfer is Frank Haith of Tulsa. Now get this. Guy shoots a hole-in-one. Okay, gets a hole-in-one. Guess what his score was? 126.
Oh, my goodness.
So do the math on the other 17, all right? Do the math on the other 17.
Oh, geez.
Best Fortnite player is Jaron Cumberland. He goes by the handle of Ninja, by the way. So if you're in a game where you got Ninja, you're in trouble. Guy can really play. Best coach dunker is Johnny Dawkins. You guys might know this. You're a lot younger than me. But Johnny Dawkins was actually in the 1987 dunk contest against Michael Jordan. Jordan won. But if you look it up, Dawkins had a really sweet dunk, by the way. And then best international man of mystery would have to be Martin Zigbanu of Tulsa. He speaks 5 different languages. I can barely speak 1. So those are my awards for this season in the American.
Good deal.
That's awesome.
I also want to get onto this before we get to your book. I want to get to all the off-season issues with Wichita State, and I want to see how you feel about it. Now, we know with this new transfer portal, guys they made it to now to where if you're a first-year transfer, you're immediate eligible. In your opinion, was this Greg Marshall's fault? Because a lot of fans are sitting here wanting to blame Greg Marshall for having these 7 transfers, 8 if you include the walk-on. Is this Greg Marshall, or just players just not wanting to adapt to today's coaching and the hard coaching by all these hard-on coaches?
I think it's all the above. And when you reach a point like this where players that you invested in, you recruited, and the entire staff, the entire athletic program, I know how invested Wichita State is. And I don't mean money. I mean personally invested in the program, how personally invested the fans are in the program, and the players for all these decades as well, over a decade now under Greg Marshall. But, I coached for 17 years. Was every player my best friend? No. And, there's going to be fits and there's going to be not fits. Now, what's unusual about Wichita State right now is that, as you mentioned, 7 scholarship players, 1 walk-on player decided to transfer. That's the most in the country right now. And so I think the real question is, what do you do now? And, we'll talk a little bit about the book, but I think that this team really suffered from the disease of me throughout about half of the season. Now, after that come to Jesus meeting before the UCF game, I think that mentally they got their heads in the right place, and give them credit for all the guys that are transferring. Think about the way that the team ended up playing over the last 10, 12 ball games. They did a pretty good job when you think about it, if there was that much dysfunction. So in that way, I think Greg handled it the right way, and I think the players did too. They came together and made the best out of the season that they could, and would have been an NCAA tournament team in all probability. But I think you got to look in the mirror. You've got to look and say, okay, what am I doing to not retain players? And by the way, in business today, it's the same challenge. Talent retention is the number one focus of CEOs in America. Because once you get great players on your team in business or on a basketball team, you want to grow them, right? You want them to get better. You want to challenge them. You want to bring them into your family. You want them to thrive in that environment. Well, for whatever reason, it didn't happen this year at Wichita State. And so as the leader, I've worked with a lot of different companies. I've had my own company, and I've had sales teams, and I've had basketball teams. And again, when relationships go south, you've got to look at yourself in the mirror. I mean, I've been married twice, so I'm 1 for 2. Not necessarily great, but it's pretty good in baseball. Pretty good in baseball. Really good from the 3-point line. Now, I've been married for 30 years now, almost 31 years. But I had to look at myself in the mirror after my first failed marriage and say, what's wrong with you? She's a nice lady. There were a lot of good things for the marriage, but it didn't work out. And so I think the first thing that has to happen, and I know that Greg is doing this and will continue to do this, you've got to look in the mirror and say, okay, where did I go wrong? You got to own your own responsibility in a relationship. On the player side, same thing. Just because an Eric Stevenson, for example, is leaving Wichita State doesn't mean that he's solved his challenges. It doesn't mean that. Now, maybe there's a better fit for him. Maybe there's a coach to bring out the best in him. But there's a reason. I'm not blaming Eric, by the way, but I'm going to say this. There's a reason why this team suffered from the disease of me. And it was an internal cancer that grew. It was never able to be extracted from the team. And that's on the players, because the best teams that I ever coached were the teams that had the best internal leadership. I would often tell my teams that the greatest championship teams I ever coached were the teams that needed me the least. And that internal leadership within the locker room is so important. So listen, there's plenty of blame to go around. My suggestion to Wichita State fans would be, look, understand that when you run your business, is everything perfect? Is your marriage perfect? Are all of your friendships perfect? No, they're not. So cut your program some slack. shut up, stop complaining, understand that your coaching staff's bringing in some pretty good players, wish the players that went off to other places, wish them well, and then move on with your life and learn from the experience. That would be my suggestion. That would be my advice.
Exactly.
Amen.
That's great advice. And
That's
also
perfect.
yeah, because I remember they interviewed Marshall, and he said that maybe he just needs to get back to recruiting the way that he did back when the Final Four run, because I think we had four or five JUCOs, or we had Armstead, who was not a grad transfer, but he transferred from Oregon. And now you've seen Marshall go out. He's already gotten 2 JUCO guys to come in next year and a couple of freshmen. I think just having juniors and seniors on this team will help a lot.
Well, let me ask you. So Adam and Armand, which is the better conference? The Missouri Valley, you've seen both, or the American?
Oh, the American by far.
Why?
Very good.
Why?
Why? Because I think the depth of teams, a little bit more talent rich, and these teams they can get players.
Yeah.
I would have to say better teams and better coaches as well. And I just feel like the competition is a lot more better than it is in the Missouri Valley.
Well, there's more pros, right? There's more
Right.
pros in the American than what you typically would see in the Valley. Now, the Valley had Doug McDermott, who was a pro. Seth Tuttle played like a pro. I mean, that dude at Northern Iowa was really, really good. A.J. Green now, by the way, who's at Northern Iowa, might be a pro as well, really good. You know, you look at Fred and Ron. I mean, you know, there have been pros, Clay Anthony Early, that have come out of the Valley, but there's more of them in the American. Great coaches in both leagues. You know, I mean, I got to sit at half court and watch all of those teams. Hard to find a better coach than Ben Jacobson. Of course, Porter Moser took Loyola to the Final Four. But there's better depth in the American. And so when you look at the transition, I mean, think about this. How friendly has the transition been for Wichita State to go from the Valley to the American? When you think about it, you know, with the step up in class and the step up in competition and how Wichita State has performed and been an NCAA tournament team, an NIT Final Four team, and now an NCAA tournament team again, going through that transition of recruiting and everything else, I think all you can do is be happy if you're a Wichita State fan.
And I think that transition was a little bit tough for Creighton after McDermott and Ethan Wragge left when they were in the Big East.
Yeah.
And finally this year they got up to the standard that we used to see Creighton.
Yeah, it takes some time. And when you lose a guy like Doug McDermott, I mean, listen, I coached the worst team in America one year. Not many guys can say that. I mean, I coached 301 out of 301. I coached the worst team in America, all right? And then all of a sudden I got this 7'3" guy that was left-handed and had a 7'3" wingspan. And we became the nation's leading shot blocking team for 2 straight seasons, and we're the most improved team in the country. Now, when you're 301, it's really not that hard to be the most improved team in the country. Right? I got to admit that. But, you know, what does it come down to? It comes down to talent. And when you move into a different conference and you lose a guy like McDermott, or you lose a guy like Fred, or you lose a guy like Ron, you lose a guy like Takeo Cotton, you know, there's going to be some challenges in replenishing that talent pool. And I think you got to be pretty happy with where Wichita State has been over the last couple of years in the American.
Yeah. All right. Before we get to your book, Adam has been dying to ask you a question about your coaching career. So I'm going to let him take it away and ask you a question.
Go for it. Anything.
Right. I'm also a Pac-12 guy because I was born and raised in Arizona. And after your success in the 80s, I was just kind of wondering what made you decide to be an assistant coach at Washington State?
That's a great question. You know, no one's ever asked me that. And, you know, being on ESPN, I always appreciate really well thought out, good questions. That's a hell of a question. So thank you. So, you know, I was at Idaho State first. I was 3 years there with Len Archibald. I had a wonderful run with him. 25-year-old head coach at Rocky Mountain College, 3 years. We went to the national tournament for the first time since 1951. Went to Western Oregon, was there for 4 seasons, won like crazy, nationally ranked, the whole thing. During my time in Montana, when I was head coach at Rocky Mountain College, Kelvin Sampson was the head coach at Montana Tech. And we became friends. And so what happened was we banded together as young coaches. He was at 6 months older than me. And we decided, look, we're going up against some really good coaches in this league. Why don't we band together and help each other? And so we did. And so we became really, really good friends. In fact, we beat Kelvin's team in the semifinals of the district playoffs to go to Kansas City. And guess who went with my team to watch my team play in the Nationals, Kelvin Sampson. That's how good of friends that we were. So anyway, I go to Western Oregon. We're winning. Kelvin ascends to the head coaching job at Washington State. He calls me after my third season and says, "Hey, I want you to come up, be my top assistant, blah, blah, blah." And I said, I can't do it. I mean, I had really good players. I loved my job at Western Oregon. We were winning. I could teach class. I loved that. And then he asked me again. He asked me a third time. And then after my fourth season, it was the summer after my fourth season, and he says, "Mark, this is your last chance. And if you want to be a Division I head coach, then you really need to seriously think about that, because I'm not asking you again." And so in August of '89, I decided to go and become Kelvin's assistant at Washington State, because why? I had the goal of being a Division I head coach, and I lived that dream. I got to be the head coach of Central Connecticut, which at times was more of a nightmare, but it was a dream. You know, it still counts. And I did enjoy my time there, and we did improve that program dramatically during that time. But Adam, I want to share another story with you that not many people know, since you asked such a good question. So many years later, then I was out of coaching. I fired in '96, and I'm out of coaching, and I was doing a lot of public speaking and things, and I was down in Oklahoma. So Kelvin asked me to come by and give a presentation to the team. And so before we were getting ready to do that, we were just visiting like old friends do. And he said, "Mark, if you could change one decision in your life, what would that one decision be?" I looked at Kelvin and I said, "I would have never come and worked for you at Washington State." Death stare, right? Friendship over type of look. I said, "Let me explain why." I said, "Kelvin, you know me well now." I said, "Look, in 1989, as a 34, 35-year-old guy, you know, my goal was to be a Division I head coach, and it was the right move to go to Washington State and work for you, and I'm grateful for that. But then as a 50-year-old guy back then, I said, I've had more clarity in my life. You know, I love the small college experience, the #1 professor at Western Oregon. I love teaching class. I like writing books and doing things like that. And you know what? I'm a small college guy, Kelvin. That's really what I am. And that's why I gravitate toward, you know, all the mid-major stuff that I do, the do more with less reports that I do, and the upsets that go on in non-conference play. So I know that's a long-winded answer, but you asked a good question. I wanted to give you a really good answer.
Well, thank you. No, that's great. And since we touched on Eric Stevenson a little bit earlier, do you think Washington is a good fit for him? Because I think it is. I mean, we could say whatever we want to say about the guy, but watching him play this year, I didn't think his defense was that great, and Washington plays a lot of zone.
Yeah.
And so do you think he'll have a better opportunity to maybe, you know, for his skills to really shine there up in Washington?
I do think that defensively it's a better fit, you know, because of the Syracuse connection with Mike and Washington and that type of thing. And offensively, you know, one thing Syracuse did over the years under Jim Boeheim is they let shooters shoot. And that's where Eric's going to get an opportunity to shoot. If I had one constructive critical comment, it would be that you have to let shooters shoot, but you also have to have common sense as to when you're going to shoot the ball and when you're the guy and when you need to defer. And I think that's been a process for Eric, and hopefully that process will continue at Washington.
Yeah, I agree.
Right.
All right, we have a couple minutes here, so let's go ahead and you want to get into your new book that's called The Coach and the Geek, Building a Kick-Butt Culture. So go ahead and explain that to us and what it's about.
You know, I'm really proud of it. It all took place once upon a time in August. I took a job with a testing company. We do software development lifecycle testing and quality processes and things like that. And the owner of the company is a guy by the name of Jeff Van Fleet, my co-author actually in the book, and we're dear friends. And one day we're driving on a sales call from Dayton, Ohio, that's where I live, to Columbus, Ohio. And he says to me, he goes, "Hey, Mark," he goes, "you know what, I know you won a lot of games, but I know you lost a lot of games too." And I said, "Thanks, Jeff." And he says, "You know, when you took over programs that weren't very good," and that's what I did, I rebuilt bad programs. And he said, "When you took over a program that you weren't going to be very good, how did you still bring a feeling of success, a culture of success to your program? How did you hold them accountable? How did you communicate effectively, even during the losses when you knew you weren't going to be very good?" I thought, man, what a great question. And I told Jeff about a strategy that I developed over the years as a head coach called the Pure Best Effort Strategy, which doesn't take any talent to do. So, for example, Armand, if I'm guarding you and you take a shot, okay, then once you shoot it, I've got to go make physical contact with you before I go pursue the rebound. Doesn't take any talent to do it, just concentration and effort, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So we developed 5 areas on defense, 5 areas on offense where it didn't take any talent. So it wasn't about scoring. It was about doing physical things that would set you up for long-term success. It was about a process-driven type of strategy. Then we also used it off the floor with our student athletes. And it would be things like they would challenge themselves with their own career best effort strategy, go to class every day. They'd mark it off as they go. So they'd measure it. They would metrically hold themselves accountable. They might have a career best effort strategy of asking 2 questions in class, for example, in order to stay engaged with the professor. It might be to notice if another classmate is doing a good job in class, asking good questions, or coming up with an interesting answer, and they would connect with them after class to spread our roots around campus. And so those would be the types of things. It didn't take any talent to do those things, just concentration and effort. And what we found was academically, we had the best student athlete grade point average of any men's basketball teams in the history of those schools. We found success both on and off the floor. And even when our teams didn't play well and maybe didn't win in those lean seasons, we could point to, well, Armand did a great job. He blocked off 9 out of 10 times. And in the other areas, he scored an 85% total for the game. That's really good, Armand. Keep it up now, but we need you at 90%. And even if you only played 2 minutes or 40 minutes, you would be able to evaluate yourself and metrically measure yourself against your teammates. It would also drive some playing time. And so we decided, you know what? Jeff says to me, Mark, that's fascinating. And he's a process guy, very disciplined. I'm a ready, fire, aim guy, you know? And so he said, why don't you write a book about that? And I said, no, why don't we write a book about that? And so we did. And thus, The Coach and the Geek, Building a Kick-Butt Culture by Mark Adams and Jeff Van Fleet. And it has been a wonderful process. We started in August. We finished about a month ago. The book is on Amazon.com right now. For a hard copy, it's $17.95. For the Kindle version, it's $9.95. It's a wonderful read. It's written as a fiction of a college basketball coach who's struggling to win games, had just taken over a program. He's been 3 years into it now. They've lost 17 consecutive years. Might sound familiar. And he realizes that he's failing and he's got to do something different. And by fate, he aligns with a geek who lost his software development leadership job. And together they build a very unique, a connected type of strategy that revolves around communication, better accountability, innovative use of technology, and they start to change the culture of this losing team. It's a fascinating read. I hope you guys will like it, and I hope all the fans out there will invest in it, because there's lessons learned at the end of every chapter, and it applies to your life, it applies to your professional life, it applies to a lot of different things that you want to do to be successful. And I'm very proud of it. I mean, I've read it 2 times and I really like it, so it must be good.
Well, I would suggest now with this national pandemic and everybody on lockdown, it'd probably be a good idea to buy that book and read it. If you have a Kindle, it'd probably be better off to order it off of that Kindle so you don't have to touch anything.
Yeah,
hey, I'm on Amazon right.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm on Amazon right now. I think I'm fixing to buy it.
Well, thank you. You know, it's really an interesting process when you write a book, because you really throw yourself out there. And while it's written as a fiction, there are a lot of truths in this story. And I think people, especially at this time when this is a challenging time, and it's a great diversion, but there's also lessons in there. One of the lessons is that the geek does get fired, and how does he come back from that experience? And that's also a fascinating part of the book as to how they come together and rebuild their lives together. And also the creative tension between a coach that really wants to win and a technologist that understands the process of success. And how can they meld that together to bring this story to fruition? I think it's fascinating read. And in fact, I use some of the strategies with my 3rd grade basketball team. We talk about how to manage half times better, how to manage your timeouts better. And I actually use some of those strategies with my 3rd grade basketball team. And oh, by the way, we played for the CYO City Championship this past season. It was really fun to watch those kids get better.
Oh, yeah. Well, Mark, we want to thank you for your time. I appreciate you agreeing to come on and talk with us on our sports show. I hope you had a good time.
It was my pleasure. You should call this the AAA show. You know, you got Aaron, you got Adam, you got Irma.
That's exactly what we thought about calling it. I decided to do it Sports Talk for You. So maybe we could do Sports Talk for You, the AAAs.
You bet. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on, and say hi to all my friends in my second home of Wichita.
Definitely, Mark. We'll definitely say hi.
You bet. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for our show today. Go ahead and like and click the subscribe button on the right side of your screen. We want to thank Mark Adams for being with us. I hope that was a interesting show for all of you, and for all you Shocker fans out there, I think Mark pretty much explained himself. So thank you again, and please like, and we will see you on our next show.